Ricky Nelson was born into American pop culture royalty. As the son of Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, his life unfolded before millions on national television. At just 8 years old, he began appearing on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, the wholesome family sitcom that introduced a generation to suburban bliss, and Ricky became its breakout star. By the time he was a teenager, he was not only a household name but a bona fide music sensation. With his boy next door looks and mellow voice, he racked up hit after hit: Hello Mary Lou, Travelin' Man, Poor Little Fool, and dozens more. He was America's first true teen idol, the bridge between Elvis Presley's rock rebellion and the Beatles' cultural explosion. But Ricky's journey wasn't destined to end on stage. It ended in flames, sudden, tragic, and shrouded in mystery. On December 31, 1985, Ricky Nelson boarded a 1944 Douglas DC-3 in Guntersville, Alabama, along with his fiancée Helen, Blair, 5 bandmates, and 2 pilots. They were en route to a New Year's Eve performance in Dallas, Texas, a stop on Nelson's comeback tour with his Stone Canyon Band. It was supposed to be just another gig in his return to the spotlight. But just a few hours before midnight, tragedy struck. The plane caught fire mid-flight and crashed into a cow pasture near DeKalb, Texas. Ricky, Helen, and all 5 of his bandmates perished. The pilots survived, and what they said afterward would ignite a scandal that would overshadow Ricky Nelson's name for decades. In the chaotic hours and days after the crash, reports began to surface that the fire was caused by freebasing cocaine on board. The pilots implied that Ricky and Helen had been using drugs in the back of the plane and that the fire erupted as a result. It was an explosive claim, sensational, salacious, and exactly the kind of scandal the tabloids thrived on. Soon, headlines were filled with shocking allegations. Overnight, Ricky Nelson, once the clean-cut heartthrob and early rock pioneer, was being painted as a cautionary tale of rock star excess, but something about the story didn't sit right, especially with Ricky's family. His children, including actress Tracy Nelson and twin sons Matthew and Gunnar Nelson, spoke out forcefully. They insisted their father had been clean. Yes, Ricky had struggled with substance use earlier in life, like many in the industry. But by the mid-1980s, he had turned a corner. He was sober, focused, and driven by a deep passion for music. He had built a life with Helen, Blair, was devoted to his children, and had big plans for the future. Those who knew him best rejected the image of a man burned out and reckless, but the damage was done. Rumors spread faster than facts, and Ricky's name became linked with tragedy and disgrace. The media had already chosen its narrative. Meanwhile, federal investigators from the FAA and SBS launched a formal inquiry into the crash, but the results were frustratingly slow, and the early rumors left a lasting impression. It would take years, decades, in fact, for the truth to finally emerge. The final FAA report delivered a much different verdict. It revealed that the fire originated not in the passenger cabin, but in the cockpit heater, an old, malfunctioning system that had been problematic for years. Maintenance records and pilot testimonies revealed repeated issues with the heater, which had sparked minor fires before. The aircraft itself was a relic of a bygone era, a 40-year-old DC-3 patched together with outdated parts and questionable safety protocols. It should never have been flying, especially not carrying a beloved rock icon and his band, but it was. And when the heater malfunctioned mid-flight, the aircraft became a death trap. Flammable materials in the cabin allowed the fire to spread rapidly. The smoke filled the fuselage. The passengers, Ricky, Helen, and the others, likely succumbed to smoke inhalation before the crash itself. They never had a chance. The 2 pilots, the only survivors, were initially hailed as heroes, but later scrutiny raised questions about their behavior before, during, and after the crash. Some suggested they had tried to shift blame to cover their own negligence. After all, the plane's safety systems had been ignored. The heater had not been properly repaired. And still, they pointed fingers at the victims. The media was all too willing to play along. It wasn't until 2020 that newly declassified documents and interviews definitively cleared Ricky Nelson's name. Investigators concluded that no drug paraphernalia had been found on the aircraft, no evidence of drug use by the passengers was present, and the source of the fire was entirely mechanical. For those who had followed the story for years, it was a bittersweet moment. The truth had finally surfaced, but it had taken nearly 35 years for Ricky's family, especially his children. The revelation was vindication, but it could never undo the emotional toll. People whispered things for years, his daughter Tracy once said. It changed how the world saw him, and that was so unfair. He wasn't a junkie. He was a dad, a performer, a man who was finally getting his life back on track. His twin sons, Matthew and Gunnar, formed the band Nelson in the early 90s, honoring their father's legacy and continuing his musical spirit. One of the most heartbreaking parts of this story is the erasure of Helen Blair, Ricky's fiancée. Though deeply in love and considered family by Ricky's inner circle, Helen's parents refused to have her buried beside him. Her remains were cremated, her memory nearly forgotten in the public narrative. No headstone, no tribute, just whispers and silence. And yet, those close to Ricky knew how much she meant to him, how she stood by him during his most difficult years, and how she died at his side. Ricky Nelson's death is more than just a tragic accident, it's a reflection of how fame can distort truth. He was an innovator in country rock, paving the way for artists like the Eagles, Tom Petty, and Jackson Browne. He played a crucial role in blending genres, giving rock a softer, more heartfelt edge. Yet, for decades, his name was tarnished not by fact, but by fiction. Hollywood and the music industry often celebrate stars on their way up and forget them when they fall. But Ricky's story reminds us of the importance of getting it right, not just for the sake of his family, but for history. Because Ricky didn't die a has-been. He died a working artist, a loving partner, and a performer committed to his craft. He died doing what he loved. In the years since, there has been a growing effort to restore his reputation. Biographers, journalists, and fans have revisited his catalog, recognizing just how influential his sound was. Shows like Ozzy and Harriet are now seen as early reality television, and Ricky's music has gained renewed respect for its role in shaping a generation. More importantly, the truth about his death is finally known, and it allows fans to grieve with clarity rather than confusion. The story of Ricky Nelson is tragic, yes, but also redemptive. It's a story about resilience, truth, and how the pursuit of fame often comes with unbearable costs. But Ricky's voice still lives on in records, in memories, and in the hearts of those who grew up with his music. He was a pioneer, a performer, and a father. And now, finally, his story can be told honestly.
Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.